Good day everyone, I am Maria Angelo Historilio and let me introduce to you the presentation of Group 3. Today, we are going to discuss ecocentrism and environmental aesthetics. But first, we're going to talk about ecocentrism. Ecocentrism, simply ecology at the center. The word ecocentrism derives etymologically from the Greek word oikos, which means house, and kentron, which means center. It is a perspective that considers planet Earth as the house in which all creatures dwell. It is a philosophy or perspective that places intrinsic value on all living organisms and their environment regardless of their perceived usefulness or importance to human beings. Ecocentrism is an environmental ethical stance that argues the ecological concern should over and above human priorities be central to decisions about right and wrong action. Ecocentrism is a perspective that places importance in the ecosystem as a whole. It focuses on the ecosystem as a whole. And lastly, ecocentrism considers both biotic and abiotic factors as important. Sa madaling salita, ito ay isang pananaw na isinasaalang-alang ang ating planeta bilang tirahan ng lahat ng nilalang. Ito ay isang filosofiya o pananaw na naglalagay ng intrinsic na halaga sa lahat ng nabubuhay na organismo at sa kanilang kapaligiran anuman ang kanilang nakikitang pagiging kapaki-pakinabang o kahalagahan ng mga tao. Here are some examples of ecocentrism: protecting coral reefs, limited mining, and conservation of land. Here is Roberto Padilla to discuss what is protecting coral reefs.
Protected reefs. The protection of coral reefs can be seen as an example of ecocentrism. Many protected reefs and even man-made reefs are lightly tread or entirely unvisited. However, in order to be truly ecocentric, the reef's protection must be driven by a desire to improve the ecosystem. Protecting a reef to promote tourism or even to protect a coastline from storms would fall into the category of anthropocentrism. So in this case, an anthropocentrist would focus on what coral reefs do for humans. One case would be tourism. Coral reefs in the Philippines provide multiple ecosystem services that contribute indirectly to food and livelihood securities of coastal communities in the Philippines and elsewhere. An anthropocentrist would even see value in the protection that the reefs give to shorelines because it protects the coastal areas by reducing the power of the waves hitting the coast.
And here is Axel Di Maandal discussing what is limited mining.
What is mining? Mining is the process of extracting useful materials from the earth. Some examples of substances that are mined including coal, gold, or iron ore. Iron ore is the material from which the metal iron is produced. The process of mining dates back to prehistoric times. Prehistoric people first mined flint, which was ideal for tools and weapons, since it breaks into shards with sharp edges. The mining of gold copper also dates back to prehistoric times. Recent bans on strip mining and mountaintop removal can be viewed as eccentric. The primary beneficiaries of mining are, of course, humans. Protecting natural areas such as mountains, even when they contain valuable minerals, shows classic ecocentric worldview. Strip mining, for example, harms the environment but can make natural resources available to human populations that need them. Ecocentricists would argue that because this is so harmful for the environment, it's immoral. Therefore, environmentalist policies are generally ecocentric in nature.
And lastly, here is Ethan Lamonte to discuss what is conservation of land.
Conservation land in M- in the United States. The first example of conservation land can be traced back to the 19th century and the creation of Yellowstone National Park. In order to meet the definition of ecocentric, conservation land must be created to protect ecosystem rather than simply to provide pretty hiking routes. All over the world, many national parks and protected areas have begun to adopt this approach, limiting visitors and prioritizing environmental protection. One of the most common examples of land conservation is the protection of privately owned land with a conservation easement. An easement is a binding legal document that stays with a deed for the future of the property and protects if it is perpetuity according to the conditions specified within.
Let us now discuss the environmental aesthetics.
What is environmental aesthetics? Environmental aesthetics is one of the major new areas of aesthetics to have emerged in the last part of the 20th century. It focuses on philosophical issues concerning appreciation of the world at large, as it is constituted not simply by particular objects, but also by environments themselves. In this way, environmental aesthetics go beyond the appreciation of the art to the aesthetic appreciation of both natural and human environments. Its development has been influenced by the 18th century landscape aesthetics as well as the tourism factors. The exclusive focus of 20th century philosophical aesthetics on art, and the public concern for the aesthetic condition of environments that developed in the second half of the century. Both factors broadened by the scope of environmental aesthetics beyond the traditional aesthetics, and both helped to set the central philosophical issue of the field, which is due in large measure to the difference between nature of the object of appreciation of environmental aesthetics, the world at large, and the nature of art. These differences are so marked that environmental aesthetics must begin with basic questions such as what and how to appreciate. These questions have generated a number between philosophical positions, two of which are the engagement and the cognitive approaches. The first holds that appreciators must transcend traditional dichotomies such as subject or object and diminish the distance between themselves and objects of appreciation, aiming at multi-sensory immersion of the former within the latter. By contrast, the second contends that appreciation must be guided by nature of objects of appreciation, and that knowledge about their origin, types, and properties is necessary for serious, appropriate aesthetic appreciation. Each approach has certain strengths and weaknesses. However, although different in emphasis, they are not in direct conflict. When conjoined, they advocate bringing together the feeling and knowing which is the core of serious aesthetic experience and which, when achieved in aesthetic appreciation of different environments of the world at large, shows that how rewarding such appreciation can be. Environmental aesthetics is an area of philosophy that considers how humans directly and indirectly experience environments, landscapes, ecosystems, and species, and the types of aesthetic judgments that follow from these experiences. We may, for example, judge a forest to be beautiful.
Examples of environmental aesthetics are that of which we see from paintings that uses the nature as its medium, like the paintings of Fernando Marsoli Iquet, a renowned impressionist painter, portraying the beauty of the nature in the Philippines, like his landscape painting, Planting Rice, and Flaming Tail, which reflects the appreciation of the aesthetic beauty in our nature, captured in a landscape painting. Garden design or applying designs on our gardens, like they do in resorts, in our backyard, or at our front porch to attract attention. It is also an example of environmental aesthetics. Ecological illiteracy, according to David Orr, a conservation education leader, is when someone failed to appreciate nature aesthetically. A person may lack the understanding and appreciation of nature,
Parents tend to let their children believe that ugliness seemed normal. Ugliness is a sign of disease and unsustainability, meaning some people do not teach their children how to take care of the environment and how to preserve it. Because of this, the disease spreads among people. Less food we can get in our environment that people fail to cultivate and plant fruits, vegetables, and anything that can sustain the survival of mankind.
To summarize the given topics, ecocentrism is simply the philosophical view that recognizes the ecosphere and the ecosystem as a whole. Both biotic and abiotic factors are important, while environment aesthetic is part of the environment sciences that focuses on aesthetic values of the environment. It focuses on philosophical issues concerning appreciation of the world at large as it is constituted, not simply by particular objects but also environments themselves. Under environment aesthetic is the conservation of aesthetic values of nature and built environment like visual, vocal, smells, textures, and taste. Another one is creating man-made environments with high aesthetic values such as buildings and built environment, man-made land features such as gardens, lakes, forests, and anything of the sort. Last one is composing a visual harmony between the building and its environment, like building within nature or nature within the building. That is all the topics we have discussed. This is Group 3 and thank you for listening.